The night was calm in Los Angeles, but inside a small restaurant hidden from the loud streets, something unusual was happening. Keanu Reeves, the man who avoided big parties and grand stages, was quietly sitting at a corner table. It was his birthday. But unlike most actors in Hollywood, there was no red carpet, no cameras, no crowd screaming his name. Instead, there was only a warm light above his table, a few simple flowers in a vase, and the sound of soft music playing in the background. Sandra Bullock entered quietly. She expected something bigger because, after all, Keanu Reeves was loved by millions across the world. But what she saw left her stunned. Keanu was not surrounded by famous friends or expensive decorations. He was sharing his dinner with two old workers from a local repair shop, men whose clothes were worn out and whose hands carried the marks of years of hard work. Keanu was laughing with them, listening to their stories, as if they were the most important people in the world. Sandra stood frozen for a moment. She whispered to herself, "This is Keanu's birthday. This is how he chooses to celebrate." Her mind raced with memories of Hollywood parties where people chased attention and displayed wealth. But here, Keanu was showing something different. He was showing humility, respect, and a deep kindness that Sandra could feel in the air. One of the workers leaned forward and said to Keanu, "We never thought a man like you would sit with us." Keanu smiled, his voice soft but strong. "Why not? I am no different. Your stories matter as much as mine. Today is not about fame. Today is about life and respect." Sandra felt a lump in her throat. She remembered her own struggles when she was younger, the times when nobody looked at her, the times when she felt invisible. Now she was watching one of the biggest stars in the world, reminding her that no one is invisible if you choose to see them. But then, something unexpected happened. A young waiter walked to the table with trembling hands. His uniform was untidy, and his face looked tired. He carried a small cake, clearly not from a fancy bakery, but made in the restaurant kitchen. He placed it in front of Keanu and whispered, "Happy birthday, sir. I made this for you." The room fell silent. Keanu looked at the cake. It was uneven. The frosting was not smooth, and the candles were mismatched. But Keanu's eyes filled with tears. He stood up, hugged the waiter, and said, "This is the most beautiful cake I have ever seen." Sandra could not hold back anymore. She walked to the table and said, "Keanu, you never stop surprising me." Keanu looked at her with his gentle smile and replied, "Life is about small things, Sandra. Big moments come and go, but kindness stays forever." The workers nodded. The waiter smiled shyly, and Sandra felt her heart grow heavy with emotion. She realized she was standing in a room filled with something Hollywood could never buy: real humanity. Outside, the city lights sparkled, but inside the restaurant, something brighter was shining. It was not the candles, not the cake, not even the famous faces. It was the unspoken truth that respect, humility, and kindness could make an ordinary night feel magical. And as Sandra looked at Keanu, she whispered in her heart, "This is real Sigma energy. No fame, no noise. Only quiet strength." The cake was still glowing with tiny flames, and Keanu carefully blew out the candles. The waiter clapped softly, the workers laughed, and Sandra felt her chest tighten with warmth. It was a birthday, unlike any she had ever seen, but she did not know that this night still held many surprises. Keanu cut the cake and insisted that everyone take the first slice before him. "A birthday is not for me alone," he said. "A birthday is for sharing life together." His voice carried no weight of pride, no tone of superiority. It was the voice of a man who knew the value of others more than the value of himself. The two workers told more stories about their struggles. One spoke about losing his job during the pandemic, how he worked as a cleaner to feed his family. The other shared how his daughter had been sick for years, and how every day was a battle to find hope. Keanu listened as if every word was precious. When the man with the sick daughter finished, Keanu's eyes grew misty. He placed his hand gently on the man's shoulder and said, "Your fight is greater than mine. You are the true hero." Sandra sat quietly, overwhelmed by emotions. She had seen actors receive awards and give speeches about humanity, but here she was watching Keanu live his words in the simplest of ways. Just as the atmosphere was settling into comfort, a loud crash came from the entrance of the restaurant. Everyone turned their heads. A man had stumbled inside, his clothes dirty, his hair messy, his eyes filled with desperation. The staff rushed to stop him, but Keanu raised his hand and said, "Let him in." The man looked around, embarrassed, and muttered, I am sorry. I just needed food. I have not eaten in days." The room froze. Sandra felt her heart drop. The waiter looked nervous. The workers were unsure of what to say, and the restaurant manager tried to guide the man outside. But Keanu stood up, walked to the stranger, and pulled out a chair. "Sit," he said. "Tonight you will eat with us." The man shook his head. "No, I do not belong here." Keanu looked him in the eyes, his voice calm but firm. "Every person belongs at a table when they are hungry. Sit." Slowly, the man sat down. Tears rolled down his cheeks as Keanu passed him a slice of the birthday cake. The man held it in shaking hands, whispering, "No one has treated me this way in years." Sandra felt goosebumps on her arms. She realized this was more than a birthday. This was a lesson. Keanu was showing everyone that humility was not an act. It was a choice, repeated again and again in moments that tested the heart. The workers began talking to the stranger, asking his name and sharing their own struggles. The waiter brought him food without asking for payment. Slowly, the stranger's broken spirit began to lift. Sandra leaned closer to Keanu and whispered, "You do not just live differently. You make people around you live differently too." Keanu looked at her with his quiet eyes. "Life is heavy for everyone. If I can make it lighter for one person, even for one night, then my birthday has meaning." The night grew deeper, but no one wanted to leave. Laughter mixed with tears, silence mixed with words, and strangers became like family. The restaurant, once just another place in the city, turned into a small sanctuary where pain was respected and kindness was celebrated. But just as Sandra thought the night was settling into peace, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an old friend, a journalist. The message read, "I heard Keanu is having a birthday dinner tonight. I am on my way with a camera team. The world needs to see this." Sandra froze. She looked at Keanu, then at the people around him. This night was raw, private, and pure. If cameras arrived, the magic could break. Sandra took a deep breath and decided she had to act quickly. Sandra's hands trembled as she stared at her phone. She knew what the arrival of cameras could mean. In seconds, this quiet evening could turn into a spectacle. The workers, the waiter, even the homeless man who had just begun to feel human again would all be exposed. What was real could be replaced by what looked good for the headlines. She glanced at Keanu. He was still listening to the stranger's story with gentle attention, unaware of what was coming. Sandra's heart raced. Should she tell him? Should she stop the journalist? Or should she let the world witness this rare moment of humanity? Before she could decide, the sound of car doors closing echoed outside the restaurant. The clattering of footsteps followed. The restaurant's glass doors reflected the bright glow of camera lights. Sandra's pulse quickened. The waiter panicked. "Sir, there are reporters outside," he whispered to Keanu. The workers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their bodies stiff with worry. The homeless man lowered his eyes, fear spreading across his face. "Please," he muttered, "I cannot be on camera. I have nothing left. I do not want the world to see me like this." Sandra's chest tightened. She looked at Keanu, expecting him to be angry or irritated. But his expression was calm, almost serene. He stood up, walked toward the door, and gently opened it before the reporters could barge in. The journalists raised their cameras immediately, shouting questions. Keanu, why are you celebrating your birthday here? Who are these people with? You? What does this mean? Keanu lifted his hand and spoke softly, but with a firmness that silenced the noise. Tonight is not a story for your cameras. Tonight is for people, not for headlines. If you came here looking for drama, there is none. If you came looking for a show, you will not find it. What you see here is just life, and life does not need to be filmed to be real. The reporters hesitated. Some lowered their cameras, but one persistent journalist pushed forward. People love you, Keanu. They deserve to see this side of you. Don't you think your fans should know what you are doing? Keanu shook his head. If kindness only counts when it is seen, then it is not kindness. Real kindness needs no audience. Those words struck the room like a wave. Sandra felt her eyes welling with tears. Even the reporters paused, their hands frozen, unsure of what to do. Keanu continued, his tone unwavering. You have stories you can chase, stories that shine with fame and money. Let this night remain untouched. Respect these people who trusted me with their presence. Respect the privacy of pain. Respect the dignity of small lives. A silence fell. The homeless man lifted his eyes, and for the first time in years, he looked hopeful. The workers exchanged glances, their faces filled with gratitude. Sandra felt something powerful move inside her. But just when it seemed the reporters would leave, one of them noticed Sandra standing near the table. Sandra Bullock, are you here too? Are you part of this? Can you speak for Keanu? The room shifted. Sandra's heart pounded. She had spent her career in front of cameras, speaking lines, facing lights. But this moment was different. This was not acting. This was truth. She took a deep breath, stepped forward, and said, Keanu does not need me to speak for him. What you are looking at is more important than any movie or award. You are looking at a man who chose humility over fame and respect over pride. If you cannot see that without your cameras, then maybe you were never meant to see it at all. The reporters grew restless. Some turned off their lights, some scribbled in silence, but the most stubborn among them muttered, The public will want to know. We cannot just walk away with nothing. Keanu's voice rose again, calm yet powerful. Then tell them this. A birthday is not about what you receive. It is about what you give. Tell them that humanity still exists, even in the quietest corners of this world. Tell them that fame cannot measure respect and money cannot measure kindness. Tell them that tonight a simple meal was worth more than any red carpet. Sandra watched as the reporters stood uncertain, their cameras heavy in their hands. Some of them lowered their heads and walked away. Others stayed, torn between their duty and their conscience. Keanu closed the door gently and returned to the table. The workers, the waiter, and the stranger all looked at him with new respect. Sandra whispered, You turned the storm away without raising your voice. Keanu smiled faintly. Storms are not always outside, Sandra. Sometimes the real storm is inside us. If we remain calm, the storm loses its power. But deep inside, Sandra knew this night was not over. Something told her that the storm had only just begun, and what came next would test them all in ways they did not expect. The restaurant grew quiet again after the reporters left, but the silence was heavy, like the calm after thunder. Everyone tried to return to their food, yet Sandra felt something shifting in the air. The stranger, the homeless man who had been given food and dignity by Keanu, was staring at his slice of cake without touching it. His hands were trembling, his eyes distant, as if the weight of the past was pressing on him. Keanu noticed. He leaned closer and asked gently, Is something troubling you? The man's lips quivered before words finally escaped. You do not know who I am. You do not know the things I have done. I do not deserve to sit at this table. Everyone froze. The workers looked at him curiously. The waiter paused with a tray in his hands. Sandra's heart tightened as she waited for his confession. The man's voice broke. Years ago, I had a family, a wife, a son. But I lost them because of my mistakes. I drank too much. I lied. I wasted everything. I even stole from people who trusted me. When my wife left, I thought I would change. But I didn't. I fell deeper. I hurt people. I hurt myself. Now I am just a shadow, walking streets where no one knows my name. The room grew heavier with each word. Sandra felt her chest ache. She could see the shame pouring out of him, the kind that eats a person alive slowly, year after year. Keanu's eyes softened. And yet, here you are tonight, sitting at this table. Sometimes the road back begins when someone chooses to sit and face the truth. The man shook his head violently. No, you don't understand. I don't deserve kindness. I destroyed too much. I am not a good man. Sandra could not stay silent anymore. Her voice was shaky, but strong. You may not feel like a good man now, but that does not mean you cannot become one. I know what it feels like to carry guilt. I know how it feels to believe you are beyond forgiveness. But I have learned that change begins the moment you allow someone to believe in you again. The man's eyes filled with tears, and for a long moment, he said nothing. Then his body shook, and he began to cry openly. His shoulders trembled, his hands covered his face, and his brokenness poured out for everyone to see. The workers reached out, one patting his back softly. The waiter placed a hand on his arm. And Keanu, without hesitation, stood and wrapped the man in an embrace. You are not alone anymore, Keanu whispered. Tonight, we see you. Not as the man who made mistakes, but as the man who still has a chance. Sandra felt her own eyes blur with tears. She had acted in emotional movies before, but this moment was beyond any script. It was raw, unpolished, and painfully human. The man lifted his face from his hands. His voice cracked as he said, Why would you do this for me? Why would you care? Keanu's answer was simple. Because someone cared for me once when I felt I had nothing. Kindness saved me, and it can save you too. The stranger fell silent, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Sandra realized she was witnessing not just a birthday dinner, but a turning point in someone's life. Just as the emotions began to settle, one of the workers cleared his throat. Maybe it's time we stop calling him stranger. What is your name? The man hesitated, then whispered, Daniel. My name is Daniel. Sandra repeated the name softly in her heart, as if holding it carefully, knowing it was fragile. The night stretched longer. The lights outside the city kept glowing, but inside the restaurant a different kind of light filled the air. Daniel slowly began to eat, each bite carrying not just food but a piece of dignity returned. But Sandra noticed something else. As Daniel shared more about his past, Keanu grew unusually quiet. His eyes often dropped to the floor, his hands fidgeted, slightly. Sandra knew him well enough to sense it. Daniel's pain had awakened something deep inside Keanu, too. Something unspoken. Something he carried but rarely revealed. And in that silence, Sandra realized the night was not only about Daniel's past. It was about Keanu's hidden scars, too. Scars that would soon come to the surface. Asterisk. The room was still, heavy with the echoes of Daniel's confession. His brokenness had spilled out like a river, and yet in the warmth of that little restaurant, a new seed of hope was planted. But while Daniel wiped his tears and tried to breathe normally, Sandra's eyes stayed fixed on Keanu. She had known him for years, worked with him, laughed with him, and admired his quiet strength. Yet tonight, something in his silence felt different. Keanu was not just listening, he was remembering. His gaze was distant, as if shadows from the past were rising in his mind. His fingers traced the rim of his glass slowly, his posture slightly bent. Sandra leaned forward, her voice soft. "Keanu, are you all right?" He looked up suddenly, forcing a faint smile. "I am fine." But Sandra knew it was not the truth. She recognized the look in his eyes, the look of someone carrying stories too heavy to share. Daniel, still shaky from his own outpouring, whispered, "You listen to me, Keanu. Maybe it's your turn." The workers and the waiter fell silent. All eyes turned to him. The air grew tight like a string pulled too hard. Keanu hesitated, his lips pressing together. Finally, he exhaled deeply, and his voice came low, almost trembling. "Most people think I live a perfect life. They see the movies, the fame, the pictures. But the truth is, I know pain. I know loss. I know how it feels to wake up and wonder if life is worth moving through another day." The words struck Sandra like a stone. She had heard stories of his past, but he rarely spoke about them. Now, in this quiet corner, he was opening the door to wounds he had kept closed for so long. "Keanu," continued, his voice breaking. "When I was young, my father left. I grew up watching my mother struggle. Later, I lost my best friend, and that pain never left me. And then, the hardest part, the woman I loved and the child we were waiting for, both gone. Just like that. One moment I had dreams, the next I had nothing but emptiness." The table went still. Sandra's breath caught in her chest. She remembered reading about his tragedies in the news, but hearing it now in his own voice was unbearable. Keanu looked down, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "People call me strong. They call me Sigma. They think I have everything. But most nights I sit alone in silence, carrying memories that still cut me like glass. I never tell anyone because I do not want pity. I only want to live in a way that honors the people I lost." Daniel stared at him, stunned. "You mean, even you? The man everyone admires, you carry pain like this?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Pain does not choose who it visits. It comes to kings and beggars, to stars and strangers. The difference is in what we do with it. We can let it destroy us, or we can let it shape us into something stronger, something kinder." Sandra's eyes blurred with tears. She wanted to reach across the table and hold his hand, but she knew his strength came from standing in his own quiet way. Instead, she whispered, "Keanu, you are not alone tonight. Not anymore." The waiter, who had been silent most of the night, suddenly spoke. "Sir, I lost my brother last year. I thought I was the only one who carried such grief, but hearing you, it feels like you are carrying it for all of us." The workers nodded, one wiping his eyes. Daniel whispered, "Maybe we all came here tonight because we needed to face our pain together." Keanu looked at them, his shoulders heavy, but his eyes softer now. "Then maybe that is the gift of this night. Not the cake, not the candles, not the fame, but the truth that even broken people can sit together and find strength." Sandra placed her hand on her chest, trying to steady her heart. She realized this birthday was unlike any she had ever seen, not because of what was happening, but because of what it was revealing. Each person at that table carried wounds, yet in sharing them, they were creating something rare. Healing. But just as the weight of Keanu's confession settled in, the restaurant door creaked open again. Everyone turned their heads. This time. It was not reporters or strangers. It was someone from Keanu's past, someone no one expected to see. Asterisk. The door opened slowly, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the quiet restaurant. Everyone turned toward the entrance, and Sandra felt her breath catch when she saw who it was. It was a woman in her late 40s, her face pale but familiar, Her eyes carried both sadness and strength, and for a moment, Keanu's expression completely changed. He froze. The calm he had carried all evening vanished, replaced by shock. His lips parted, but no words came out. Sandra looked from the woman to Keanu, her heart racing. "Who is she?" she whispered. The woman walked forward, her steps steady, though. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked at Keanu with eyes that seemed to carry years of unsaid words. Finally, she spoke in a soft, fragile tone. "Hello, Keanu." The sound of her voice seemed to strike him like a wave. He whispered back, "Elena?" Sandra's chest tightened. She had never heard that name before. She could feel tension rising in the room as silence spread among the others at the table. Daniel leaned closer to the worker next to him and whispered, "Who is she?" But no one had an answer. Elena took another step closer. "I did not come here to disturb you. I almost turned back at the door, but I heard it was your birthday, and I could not leave without saying this." Keanu's eyes grew darker, filled with a storm of emotions. "Why now? After all these years?" Elena's voice shook, but she forced the words out. "Because I never told you the truth. I never told you why I left when I did." Sandra felt her pulse quicken. This was no ordinary encounter. This was a ghost from Keanu's past, carrying secrets that could tear open wounds he had just confessed. Keanu shook his head slowly. "You don't need to say anything. The past is gone. I accepted it," but Elena stepped closer, her voice rising with urgency. "No, you accepted a lie. You believed I walked away without reason. You believed I left because I stopped loving you, but that was never true." The workers and the waiter sat frozen, their eyes wide, caught in the storm of emotions they did not fully understand. Daniel leaned forward, whispering, "Sometimes the people we love break us the deepest." Keanu's jaw tightened. "Then why did you leave, Elena? Why did you disappear when I needed you most?" Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Because I was sick, Keanu. I was told I did not have long to live. I could not bear the thought of you watching me fade away. I thought leaving would spare you the pain." The air in the restaurant grew, unbearably heavy. Sandra's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wet with tears. Keanu's face turned pale, as if the ground had been ripped from beneath him. He whispered, almost to himself, "All these years, I blame myself. I thought I was not enough. I thought I drove you away." Elena's voice cracked. "No, you were everything to me. Leaving you was the hardest thing I ever did. But I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was saving you from grief." Daniel's eyes filled with tears again, his own story of loss echoing in her words. The workers sat in stunned silence. Sandra reached across the table, touching Keanu's hand gently, grounding him in the moment. Keanu finally spoke, his voice breaking. "Do you know what that choice did to me? I carried your absence like a wound that never healed. I lived every day wondering why I wasn't enough for you to stay. I could have faced your sickness with you. I could have walked through it by your side. But you took that chance from me." Elena's tears spilled over. "I know. I realize. Now that I robbed us both. I thought I was sparing you, but instead I left you alone with pain. The silence that followed was suffocating." Everyone at the table felt the weight of the truth pressing down on them. Sandra's eyes blurred as she whispered, "Keanu, maybe tonight is not just about your birthday. Maybe it is about healing wounds that were never meant to stay open." Keanu looked at Elena, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stood, his body trembling. He walked to her, his eyes locked on hers, filled with grief, anger, and love all at once. The entire room held its breath. The restaurant was silent, so silent that even the soft hum of the city outside felt far away. Every eye was fixed on Keanu as he stood face to face with Elena. His hands shook, not from weakness, but from the storm of emotions trapped inside him. Anger, sorrow, and love battled within his heart, each demanding to be heard. Elena's tears streamed freely now. She whispered, "I never stopped loving you, Keanu. Leaving was my greatest mistake, and I have lived with that guilt every single day." Keanu's lips parted, but no words came. For years, he had carried the weight of abandonment, the sharp sting of questions that never found answers. Now, in one moment, the truth stood before him. It did not erase the years of pain, but it gave them a shape, a reason. Sandra felt her own heart ache. She knew Keanu as strong, reserved, always carrying himself with quiet dignity. But tonight, she was watching him unravel, not as a movie star, not as a symbol, but as a man confronting the rawest parts of his soul. Finally, Keanu spoke, his voice breaking like glass. "Elena, you thought you were protecting me, but you left me in the dark. Do you know what silence does to a heart? It makes it blame itself. It makes it believe it was never worthy." Elena's sobs grew harder. I know I hurt you. If I could change the past, I would. But tonight I only ask for forgiveness, not because I deserve it, but because you deserve peace." The room trembled with emotion. Daniel lowered his head, whispering, "Forgiveness is the hardest road, but it is the only one that sets us free." The workers nodded softly, their faces heavy with empathy. Even the young waiter stood frozen, his eyes wet, as if this moment was too sacred to interrupt. Keanu closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, they shone with tears, but also with something else. Acceptance. He stepped closer to Elena, his voice gentler now. "I cannot forget the pain, Elena, but I can choose not to let it poison me anymore. I forgive you." Those 3 words hung in the air like a blessing. Elena collapsed into his arms, sobbing against his chest, her body shaking with years of regret finally released. Keanu held her, his own tears falling silently, not as a sign of weakness, but as proof of strength. The strength to let go. Sandra wiped her tears, unable to contain the emotions crashing inside her. She whispered, This is what true strength looks like. Not the fame, not the movies, but the courage to forgive." Daniel leaned back, a faint smile breaking through his weary face. Maybe tonight was not just about Keanu's birthday. Maybe it was about all of us finding something we had lost. The waiter nodded. "Hope," the workers added softly. "Respect." Sandra whispered, "Kindness." And Keanu, still holding Elena, spoke the final word. Healing. The room glowed with a quiet warmth. The birthday cake had been eaten, the candles melted away, but something far brighter had been lit inside each person present. Strangers had become family, broken hearts had found strength, and old wounds had been given a chance to close. As the night came to an end, Keanu walked to the center of the room and raised his glass of water. "Tonight has reminded me of one truth. Life is short, pain is long, but love is longer. If we can face our scars together, then no one has to carry them alone. Thank you all for being part of this birthday, for giving me the only gift that matters, your presence." Everyone raised their glasses, their eyes shining with tears. Sandra looked at Keanu and whispered quietly to herself. Real Sigma energy is not silence, not distance, but the power to stand in your pain and still choose kindness. The lights of Los Angeles still shone outside, restless and endless. But inside that small restaurant, a deeper light remained. It was the light of respect, humility, resilience and kindness, the kind of light that could not be captured by cameras, only by hearts. Keanu looked around one last time, his eyes settling on each face: Sandra, Daniel, the workers, the waiter, and finally, Elena. For the first time in many years, his heart felt lighter. Not because the past was gone, but because he no longer carried it alone.